Hello, I'm Jared Fry, General Manager of Medina TV, and I want to welcome you to our 2019 Candidates Forum. And of course, joining me as always is Jacqueline Rinksmeyer with the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, thank you, Jared. We are once again pleased to partner with Medina TV to offer our viewers an opportunity to become more informed voters for the upcoming November election.
And of course, Medina TV or the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce do not support or endorse any of these candidates. This is just brought to you as an informational way to learn more about the candidates running for office.
All candidates in contested races were invited via certified letter to participate in the interviews today.
So sit back and get informed with our 2019 Candidates Forum. Now joining me in studio is Jess Hazeltine, candidate for Ward 1. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
And first, why don't you start off and just inform our residents and voters and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, my name is Jess Hazeltine, obviously. I've lived in the Medina County area I moved here in 2002 to Valley City. I actually became a resident of Medina about 7 years ago. My husband and I purchased a home here. I have two children, Jack and Grace. They're both lucky enough to go to Garfield. Now my son's at Claggett. So we've really had a great experience here in Medina. And I've been involved in pretty much every nonprofit someone's wrangled me into over the years that I've lived in Medina. So I've made my way around town.
Yeah, so now what is your drive or your passion that has made you throw your hat in the ring and running for Ward 1?
Well, I really love all the nonprofits I'm involved in. I love the notion of giving back. I love all of those things. But then I began to realize that in order to advocate for the issues that really mattered and the ones that were close to home for me, I would need a different platform to do that from. Mm-hmm. So City Council is hopefully going to serve as that platform so that I continue to enact change on a higher level. Mm-hmm. I think of myself as a voice for people that don't have a voice. And there's lots of people in Ward 1 that aren't sure how to approach their council person. They're not familiar with city council meetings. Mm-hmm. But if you go door to door and you ask them, hey, what's going on in your neighborhood? Then I can speak up and let the council know and let anyone who needs to know this is a problem in their area. So it's mostly to be a mouthpiece for the people of Ward 1 because I don't see their needs being met. And I want to make sure that attention is drawn to the things that are important to them, because that's what an elected official does.
Yeah. And now in terms of Ward 1, we'll stay focused on the ward right now. What would you see as maybe some initiatives or things you would like to tackle if elected?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. So when I've been walking around on the campaign trail, there's three things that people have asked me about. So number one is recycling. Mm-hmm. Number two is the courthouse, of course. And then number three, surprisingly, is people have damage to their sidewalks in front of their homes. So there's an issue which the average person and even myself wasn't too familiar with how that worked. Whether it would be the homeowner's responsibility or if it would be up to the city, because what happens is the tree roots grow up and warp the sidewalk. And sometimes it's due to something on the homeowner's side, and then sometimes it's something that falls on the city. So that's actually been an issue that I've worked with two people on so far. Mm-hmm. You know, they contacted me and they said, hey, we heard you're running and we have this problem and we haven't gotten any results. You know, do you know what to do? And I'm like, well, I don't, but I'll find out for you because it's easy enough. So that was a big one. But my biggest thing is that I kind of feel like Ward 1, and I saw this a lot when I worked at the Recovery Center, I kind of feel like Ward 1 is hit or miss. There's some areas, it's beautiful because it's so diverse of an area, but some areas are neglected. And if we're this historic Medina town with the perfect square, that love needs to be in all the wards. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely some cleanup efforts that need to be going on. There's a lot of renters in Ward 1, and you can't just put all of the burden on one person. We need to work together as a ward and try to make it look better for everyone. So there's nothing, wrong with helping your neighbor, forming a community collaborative and getting together and just trying to beautify the areas. Recently, Main Street Medina, I'm a board member at Main Street, but we did Champion Creek cleanup, and then we did the Southtown cleanup. And on both of those, it's like every other cleanup that I've done, you know, you end up with some houses that just have neglected yards, and you end up just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. But that's something that there's tons of local groups that could do. So beautifying Ward 1 and spearheading that initiative to make it nicer for everyone is really important to me.
And now Ward 1 also is one of those areas that has a lot of balance between business
Yes.
and residential. How about touching on that? Any thoughts on the balance there?
Here's the thing, it's multi-zoned. So zoning is actually a big thing that I've talked with constituents about too. One of them was the new Foundry building going in. And you know, Bronson Street is an area that has so much potential. But over the years, it's gotten a bad rap. So they're putting this foundry in at the end, the Foundry Brewery, and the residents who live on Bronson have worked really hard to clean up Bronson Street to make it their own, to make it look good. And they want to kind of keep it residential. But because of the conditional zoning that this new business is going in, you know, they're allowed to be there. So being an agent to act as a bridge between the two of those and the zoning is important, because there's one side that's coming at it from a business end, and then there's another side that's coming at it from a residential end, and neither one is really, they're too focused on each of their own goal to have a third party unbiased opinion where they're going to say, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to make money. I see what you're trying to do. You've taken a lot of pride in trying to improve your neighborhood, and you feel like this is not a good idea. So zoning issues when it comes to businesses and residences is a lot of coming together and just talking. And I think a lot of times residents are not sure where to go with that. Just like with the trees, they're not sure who to address. So being able to be aware of those problems and then help people understand, you know, hey, you can call Jonathan. I talked to him ahead of time for you. This is how zoning in that area works. Here's maybe some compromises we can try out. So it is, like I said, not just economically, ethnicity, even diversity-wise as far as being business, industry, and residential. I mean, there's a big mix, especially where I live. I live right behind AI Root Candle. So you've got business, house, bed and breakfast, you know, historical home. So it's a healthy mix of everything. So I kind of live right in the thick of it. So.
Yeah. And now, so we touched on Ward 1. Now let's look at the bigger picture in terms of council. Coming in, a couple issues that you get to inherit if you were elected is, well, number one, the parking deck. Kind of your thoughts about the parking deck and what it means for the city.
Well, the parking situation right now. Now, I generally am pretty smart about it. I live really close, so I walk. But there's a couple issues that need to be touched on when it comes in regards to the parking deck. Do we need a parking deck? Absolutely. We need more parking downtown, or uptown, as some people refer to it. I'm not quite the generation where I have the uptown, downtown argument. But there needs to be more parking. Right now, the city is kind of working with the business owners on a compromise, because some of the business owners have younger people, or I hate to say the damsel in distress, because I don't think I've ever been distressed in my life, but they have female employees that are a little bit nervous walking to the separate areas that have been allocated for parking. So since that is not in use right now, they're trying to find ways around that so that their employees are safe at night. But when that parking deck is there, it's going to be important that there's proper lighting, that there's proper security, police doing drive-bys, because while it is a very much needed resource in that area, we do have to also think of the business owners and their employees and their safety when they're going out to their cars.
And then another issue, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier in one of your answers, is of course the courthouse project.
Yes, the courthouse project. I don't like to speak to things that I don't know about. So I have been to the commissioners' meetings, and I've asked, Commissioner Hudson, and he said, he speaks for everyone, that they're going to try and maintain, as much as they can. So my personal thoughts are that corner section, don't touch it. We just spent a bunch of money replacing the windows. Living in a Century home myself, I know how exact you have to be and how expensive it is. They did some pieces on the roof. That needs to be maintained and stay where it is. The other part I understand from both parties. I've been down in the courthouse. I've been in adult probation. It needs a lot of love down there. So there is a need for a new one. But that front column area that everyone's used to, the new courthouse, people are attached to that. They see it as iconic Medina, and they want it there. So I don't understand enough about architecture, but I feel like there could be a compromise where it could still be cohesive. But people have to also understand that when we build a new courthouse, wherever it may be, if they build it over the Muni Court, if they, this project goes through, there's going to be a need for more judges, for county common pleas judges, and we need a place to house them. There's going to need to be more parking. Currently, that parking deck is not load-bearing enough to carry another level. So the parking will be an issue if they expand into the existing parking lot. However, as the population of Medina grows, we do need more courthouse space. So that fact is, you can't do anything about that. We're going to need more courthouse space. However, I really am invested in maintaining the integrity of Medina's history. And that corner piece and the front, whether it's new or old, is iconic to the people of Medina. And, I tell my husband this all the time when we're arguing. I'm like, you don't get to invalidate my feelings. You don't get to say they're stupid, because just because they're stupid to you doesn't mean they're stupid to me. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how this is. People value that, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. That's important to them. Mm-hmm. And it may not be important to Joe Schmo, but somebody over here is very important, and they want to maintain that. And I personally love all of the architecture on the square, but as Commissioner Swedick pointed out, it's that new section is not the same type of architecture as the rest of the square. Mm-hmm. So it poses several questions. Can we make it so that it matches the rest of the square? Do people love the look that they have now and have great memories associated with the new courthouse, and that's what they want to hang on to? It just kind of depends. But my goal would be to provide more transparency. The county and the city, they work together pretty well. But sometimes, there's some tension, like there is in any relationship. And I would ask that there be more transparency from the county to the people. Because people don't understand when they hear these huge numbers. Oh my God, that's so much money. And it is so much money, even for someone who's used to dealing with those figures on a county basis or on a city basis. So maybe taking it down a level and just taking a little bit of time to explain to the people, well, this is why this costs so much. This is, this is why we have to contract with this person. We can't pick somebody local because we're restricted by, the money that we're getting to do this, by who we can pick, because the average person doesn't know that. So even just taking that time to create that transparency would help a lot and go a long way in the project. Mm-hmm. But as for me, I want to maintain as much as I can. Mm-hmm.
Now, another issue that come up, and they've already passed some legislation, but in terms of diversity and inclusion, that would be something, if elected, that I'm sure will continue to change and evolve with state and federal laws. What are your thoughts and opinions on that topic?
Well, I'm going to be brutally honest here. My thoughts and opinions, I had the opportunity to speak with on a live webinar yesterday with Elizabeth Eckford of the Little Rock 9. And if you're familiar, she's one of the 9 high school students that went into one of the first desegregated high schools. Looking back, I'm sure there's a lot of people that wish they were on the right side of history rather than what we came to know was wrong. That's how I feel about the LGBTQ community. I don't want to look back and tell my kids that I was on the wrong side of history. Everyone, no matter who they are, what they are, how they identify, deserves an equal chance. The Constitution guarantees the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can one pursue happiness if their rights as a human being are being taken away from them? So without a doubt, I will go, I'm a reasonable person. I love to listen to both sides so that I can get, I'm one of those people that loves to go back and forth politically. Religion, all those hot topics you're not supposed to talk about. I like to hear what other people have to say. I don't want to force my opinion on you. I want to hear what you have to say, and then we bounce back. But as far as LGBTQ goes, I'm really for it. I'm not going to lie, that's not something that I'm ashamed of. I would do everything in my power on council to keep the legislation and the new ordinance passed. I absolutely believe that those are rights that the LGBTQ community should be afforded. I don't think that it's anything that we shouldn't be doing as decent human beings. It's not about someone's sexual preference, how they identify. It's about being a decent human being. And my personal moral compass would not lead me that way. I just, like I said, I can't imagine looking at my children and saying, I made a mistake and I was on the wrong side of history. You know, I chose to have a hateful point of view. And that's not something that I promote, and it's not something I would want to promote to anybody, most of all our children.
Now, in terms, and you kind of mentioned it in your answer you just gave, relationships and dealing with people. And being in an elected office in Ward 1, you have to find that balance, I guess, of what you'd like to see done, as well as what your constituents like to see done.
Absolutely.
How do you see that balance kind of playing out?
That balance is kind of a no-brainer for me, because when you're an elected official, people put you there to be their mouthpiece. That was one of the things that spurred, I've wanted to run for council for several years. That was one of the things that spurred my decision, is that I saw groups of people coming forward and saying, we want this. The constituents are saying, we want this to pass, or we want this issue resolved in this manner. And then their representatives were not, in their votes, reflecting the fact that their constituents had come forward and said, hey, we want this, and just disregarding what their constituents said. I want to know what everybody thinks. And that can be as simple as, if you don't utilize social media now to get people together, you're foolish. It's one of the biggest platforms that people get their information from, they get their news from. That could be as simple as putting out a social media request. We're having a little meeting, we want to discuss this issue. I want to know your thoughts. Because how am I supposed to know what's going on all the way down by Target, which is how far Ward 1 extends, when I'm over here in the AI routes section? I don't know unless you tell me. So when you bring forth a call to action like that for people to come together and discuss it, then you really have an idea of what the people want. And you take that information, you consider it into the city's long-term plan, but truly, you can't let your personal thoughts get into it. You have been elected to do what your constituents want. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all it is. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. When you take office, you're saying, I will do what you want. And if I don't like it and I find out that I have to do lots of things I don't want to do, then I won't run again. But I don't think that'll happen. I'm always open to open dialogue. I love ideas. I'm information junkie. Like, I just love to take it all in. I love to hear what other people have to say. I like to consider that, mull it over. So I'm the type of person that would listen to what everybody says. And, you have to go with majority. So when the majority of the constituents say, hey, we want this, that's the way that I have to proceed when acting in council. Now, the minority that doesn't agree, that doesn't mean they have to be ignored. That doesn't mean that once such issue passes, that we have to just discard them. We continue working towards a compromise. You're never gonna make them change their mind. But you can continue to work with them and nurture a healthy friendship and a healthy balance. Because if you have, it's almost like a cancer, where someone is so angry, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything as a ward, let alone a city.
Now, in terms of that, I'll flip it a little bit as you deal with just the 7 members of council then, because there's going to be times on topics that, like you said, there might be differing opinions. How do you see yourself, or how would you see the council working ideally in your mind?
Well, for instance, I have this friend, and he is completely the opposite thoughts of mine, how I think. But I appreciate everything that he says, and I always take it into account, and then I respond in kind. So there's nobody that I really can't absolutely work with. I believe there is always a way to reach something that everyone can agree on. It's not always rainbows and butterflies. And that's just the way of the world, whether it's on city council, whether it's up to the presidency, whether it's in my own house telling my kids to do what they're supposed to do. It's not always Facebook, beautiful picture, So you do have to do that behind the scenes work with your fellow council members, and you have to put in the work, you have to pay attention to what they're saying, and you need to respect their opinions. And then once you have the information, then you can go forward and make an educated decision. You can talk with them, you can either agree, disagree, or come to a compromise. But it's extremely important with constituents and with the other members of council to listen to what they have to say, because sometimes they're speaking to things that I have no idea about. But if I don't take the time to listen, then I won't know. And I can just ignorantly sit on my own opinion. And like I said, that's ignorant. I don't want to do that. I want to take in the information they have to offer, and I want to make an educated choice based on that. So yeah, I feel like I would work really well with anybody who's on council.
And speaking of working well with them, I know we talked earlier about your goals for Ward 1. What would your goals be as the city as a whole?
City as a whole. Well, I don't think it's any secret that I'd like to see Medina be a little bit more progressive. I'd like to see some more equality legislation passed. And, some people agree with that and some people don't. But I want Medina to be a happy, fair, and this sounds like, kind of like a little fairy tale, but I want everyone to feel comfortable in Medina. No matter what that means to them. If that means that they don't agree with the legislation and the majority says we don't want this, the majority of the city is going to be happy. They're going to feel comfortable where they live. I want Medina to be a welcoming community. I want to see Medina prosper. Part of what we touch on Main Street Medina is, bringing new business in, stimulating the economy. I want Medina to be a place that people are happy to come to and people are happy to live. So I guess the quality of life is what I would like to see raised.
And then lastly, as we go to wrap up here, in case I missed anything or there's something you would like to say, this is your chance. I'll give you a moment here. You can look right at the camera and talk to our voters and kind of let them know anything you want to hear. Yes.
Well, like I said, my name is Jess Hazeltine, so don't forget that on November 5th. But most importantly, I want you to know that I'm a fair and honest candidate for Ward 1 City Council. I promise to never ignore your phone calls. I promise to respond to your emails. I previously worked at a recovery center, so it's a 24/7 job, and I don't anticipate council being any different. So you can count on me come November 5th. And remember, vote Jessica Hazeltine.
Again, that's Jess Hazeltine, candidate for Ward 1 for City Council. And Jess, I appreciate your time here today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Best of luck to you this November.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.